When the people heard the noise of a car engine at night, they were having the nightmare of their life. In school, he was asked to come home and persuade our father to renounce the land and willingly to go and offer his land for the agricultural cooperative. He came home and he told my dad what the school is asking, under the threat that if our father is not giving the land, he would be expelled from school. The communist police came with those black vans, Duba, and they came late at night with the head-on lights on the house, and communist police with masks will jump out of that car, burst into the house, grab the husband of the house, threw that person into the black van, and they will disappear. And nobody would ever hear what happened to that person. Those who never compromise, most of them died in the communist jail. Some of them survived.
So let's start by having a conversation about the situation of the church, the evangelical church of Romania, Christianity in Romania, so we can understand what happened in that very dark period after World War II and before the revolution of 1989.
If we go back to the end of the First World War, Romania came out of the war economically exhausted. And there was a time under the rule of various political parties that tried to modernize Romania. And there was a time with foreign investment and with the kind of economic growth. However, the political landscape of Romania, especially in the 30s after the Great Depression, the political landscape was broken. A number of political parties that were competing for power, none of them having majority. Very fragile coalitions and governments being overthrown almost every 3 months. It was a political instability. Out of that instability, inspired by the uprising of the National Socialism in Germany, in Romania, a nationalist movement emerged. It was a sort of combination of German Nazi and religious orthodoxy in Romania. They became very influential and powerful. Since the political landscape of Europe was shaky, the Romanian government came under the leadership of General Antonescu. He was a military man, and he was in favor of Romania's relationship with Germany. However, influenced by various political trends in Romania, Antonescu outlawed all the evangelical churches, confiscated the properties and shut down all the buildings, and all the evangelical went into the background illegal situation.
So this is the point that I wanted to emphasize a little. It wasn't just against evangelicals, but the Antonescu regime was also responsible for a large number of Jews being deported to the concentration camp. Tell us a little bit, for those who don't know, about the evangelicals of Romania. So if we can take a few minutes, just give us a history how evangelicals arrived in Romania, because Romania was and is a majority Orthodox nation, yet there is a thriving evangelical movement. What are the roots of that?
Yes, Romania is a majority Orthodox country, and that goes back to the 6th century when the Bulgarians came south of the Danube, and suddenly the Roman Latin Catholic influence diminished, and more since the Bulgarians under the King Boris adopted the Eastern Constantinian religion. Romania came under the influence of the Slavonic Orthodoxy. Then when the Russian rising, the Slavonic influence from Russia was equally very, very strong. And the Romanian princes of Wallachia, the old provinces of Romania and Moldova, were more inclined toward Byzantine type of religious life. Transylvania, on the other hand, was more under the Catholic and Protestant influence of the Austro-Hungarian. So you had the three provinces, two more influenced by the Slavonic Orthodoxy, and Transylvania more under the Catholic and Protestant influence. However, the first evangelical that established communities in Romania were the Baptists. In 1884-85, they came from various corners. Some of them came from Germany through Hungary. Some of them came from Great Britain, and they went into the Black Sea area. And some of them came from Ukraine, and they came from that northeast part of the country. So there are various streams of Baptists, but slowly they began to come together and form the Baptist Association.
So by the early 20th century, you had the three large denomination: Baptist, Pentecostal.
And no, just hold on a second. Then the next group that came, they were the Brethren.
Okay.
And they came from Switzerland, the Swiss Brethren. Mm-hmm. And they came primarily into Bucharest, southern area, and around Brașov. And they established communities in that area. Then at the turn of the century came the Pentecostal. And the Pentecostal came from primarily from the United States with the Azusa Street movement, and then from other European countries. And slowly they start to plant churches in various parts of the country. So during the period between the two world wars, all these churches began to grow. And under the influence of the nationalist, socialist movement of the Garda de Fer, the Iron Legion,
right,
and General Antonescu, they were outlaw. However, they had a significant influence in the life of the communities where they live, in the sense that they began to work. They were good farmers, and they were also good manufacturers. So they created some small pockets of wealth in the regions where they live. Then there was another significant movement that started in 1923 within the Orthodox Church, the Lord's Army,
right,
with the priest Joseph Trifa. An Orthodox priest that had a sort of personal experience with God of what he called regeneration. He was very influential in spreading a new sort of spirituality within the Orthodox communities. So Romania had a sort of spiritual revival, we could say. Then out of the Orthodox Church, there was another movement under another Orthodox priest, Tudor Popescu, that together with Dumitru Cornilescu, an Orthodox young monk who translated the Bible into modern Romanian, he had a conversion, something like Martin Luther, coming to grip with the whole idea, how can man be just and justified before God? And we had all these streams with the Lutheran that were among the Germans, with the Catholics that were among the Hungarians, and the Reform also among the Hungarians. So a very, very well-balanced Christian religious presence in Romania at that time.
So it was a thriving community during the 1920s, the 1930s.
Yes.
A lot of good things were happening among the religious people. The scripture was being translated. And then we had the Iron Guard and World War II, which was certainly a dark period for the whole world, but certainly for the evangelicals.
Well, the Iron Guard and then the conflict with the General Antonescu, and there was a sort of crimes at conspiracies and coup. It was a very turmoil time in the Romanian politics at that time. However, once the evangelicals were outlawed, that established a sort of precedent. You can persecute Christian churches.
Right.
That's persecution is a way to deal with them. So at the end of the Second World War, there was a short period of time of spiritual, I would say, awakening, because many people that came back from the war, they had that experience of encountering God in the foxholes.
Right.
They came home and they changed the landscape of their families and their communities because they planted small churches. Those churches began to grow because these people had a tremendous testimony of a transformed life. And we go back to Genesis 1 and Genesis 3. Change nature, change relationships. They began to enjoy the appreciation, the respect of their communities. And we had in the rural Romania a significant number of people that embrace evangelical Christianity. We had evangelical churches in the rural area of Romania.
I was going to ask, because that's what you were born into, right?
Yes.
So 1945 was the end of World War II.
Yes.
You were born kind of like on the western border of Romania in Transylvania. And in that region, there was a lot of revival,
Yes.
which was as a backlash against World War II. A lot of veterans came back from the front. Some of them have been prisoners in Russia.
Yes.
Some of them have fought all over Europe. And as they came back and resumed their peasant life, they had a renewed spirituality to them.
Yes.
And they planted churches and they had a big fervor on that. Can you talk about that?
Yes, I can talk. I think that the strength of their spiritual inner life that transform everything within their own household and in the communities around had a benefic impact on the life of Romania. Because when the Lord's Army movement started within the Orthodox Church, Joseph Trifa, the initiator of that movement, said that the moral condition of the Romanian people after the tragic story of the Legion Guard and the dictatorship of Antonescu and the war, the moral standards were so low that only something of a supernatural origin could change the Romanian ethos. So the evangelicals were on the forefront
Of that.
and on the other hand, the Lord's Army was on the forefront within the Orthodox
Within
Church.
the Orthodox Church.
So with that, let me tell you, people were moving from one place to another, traveling on weekends. And they will have extended weekends on Christian celebration. They would meet together and they will sing songs and they will have testimonies and there will be biblical messages. Then they will have a meal together. The impact of these communities was contagious.
Right.
So here comes now the communist.
Yeah.
1945. A thriving Romanian Christian communities. But the communists are not native of Romania.
Right.
They came from Russia because after the Bolshevik took power, they formed what they called the international communism, called the Comintern.
Right.
The Comintern was an agency of the Soviet communists to export or implant communism into other parts of the world.
It was almost like a missionary agency. So they would take people from the various nations, would take them into Moscow, would train them, brainwash them, some may say, and then send them back to their native nation. Just that sometimes they had the tanks to support them as well, didn't they?
So they started the Communist Party in Romania. But the Communist Party of Romania never took roots in the Romanian society was not very popular. However, at the end of the Second World War, Stalin said that wherever the Russian tanks move,
Right.
there will be Russian territory or Russian control territory. So you know the story at the end of the Second World War. The United States president was sick. Churchill was in a time of no longer welcome by the British people as the new leader. So there was a time when the Western negotiator was very weak,
Right.
when they negotiated with Joseph Stalin, the New World Order post-war.
The Yalta Accords.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Romania came under the influence of the Soviet Union. And communism was brought to Romania not because the Romanian welcomed the ideology or the Soviet model, but became in the power of the tank and the Red Army.
So that's the point that I want to make for our listeners. During the first part of the war, Romania was aligned with Nazi Germany. That's how all the atrocities took place, so on and so forth. Then by 1944, because the king, Romania turned against the Germans and aligned themselves with the Russians, with the Soviets. Yet that meant that the Soviets, once they invaded, they did not go home. And I think this is a very important point to make, that communism in Eastern Europe was not a homegrown phenomenon, but it was imposed through force, through the tanks. People did not adhere. And then there was that category of individuals of questionable morality that speculated this. And they said, okay, since we have communism, why don't we take over the power? So talk to us a little bit about that transition time. So the king was a beneficial figure. He's the one that brought the evangelicals into legality. And then he was forced to abdicate in 1947, right?
The alliances during the Second World War were very strange because they put together Great Britain, United States, and Soviet Russia
Right.
on the same side. Germany, Japan, Italy, Austro-Hungary on the other side. So when the Soviet communists were on the same side with United States and Great Britain, King Michael changed the course of action of Romania in the war, not because of Soviet Russia, but because of the United States
Right.
and Great Britain. So he turned against the Nazi because he understood how history is moving. However, because Stalin had the upper hand at the negotiation at Yalta, Romania came under the rule of communism. And King Michael was forced to leave in 47 abdicate in 47. Then the communists follow the Russian Soviet model of dealing with religion. And here we should mention the man that was in charge in Soviet Union to design the communist strategy to eradicate religion. It was a Soviet leader by the name Vyshinsky. Vyshinsky designed a plan in several steps. The first step was try to attract the leaders of the Christian churches into the fold of the communist propaganda by offering them privileges, by playing the good guys with them. Because during the Second World War, in the initial stage, Stalin realized that the majority of the Russian population and Russian churches would welcome the German troops because they were under the heavy heel of the communist Soviet.
Yeah, so the Nazis were probably better than the communists because they were the purges that happened in the Soviet Union during the 30s, and millions of people went to the gulags and were executed. Yeah.
So at that moment, Stalin, very shrewd, changed the strategy. He began to offer financial support to churches and a lot of privileges to the priests.
Yes.
So suddenly when they got all these privileges, they sided with the Soviet leaders to protect the motherland of Russia.
But it was to the priest personally. So it wasn't necessarily to the church. So it wasn't like they were rebuilding the churches and things like that, but rather they were giving the privilege to them as individuals.
They knew something that we have to be constantly reminded.
Right.
It goes back to the time of Constantine. When the church got the privileges of the emperor, the church suddenly lowered down its spiritual, moral standards and the critical attitude to the injustices of the society.
Right.
So I constantly ask my students, what was more damaging to the church? The persecution of Nero or the privileges of Constantine?
Yeah, good question.
Yes. So here Stalin, under the influence of this communist leader Wyszynski, targeted the Romanian priests and leaders, pastors, offered them privileges. The second step was those that will not welcome the offer of the communists, they will be targeted to be morally compromised or even ousted
Right.
from the communities. So here we saw the Romanian churches caught between the rock and the hard place, because on the one hand, everybody enjoyed privileges. So a number of priests, Orthodox, Catholics, Reformed, Lutheran, and evangelical pastors sided with the communists. Now that was a turning point in biblical interpretation.
Right.
Because a number of priests and pastors welcomed the communists as being a kind of messianic response.
Liberators.
Liberators.
Yeah.
And they went so far as to interpret the Song of Virgin Mary as being the Christian manifesto.
Really?
Because he will overthrow the powerful. He will overthrow the wealthy, and he will feed the poor. So now this is the communist manifesto.
Wow.
Secondly, they look at the biblical records in the book of Acts.
Right.
And they began to invoke that records as being the biblical foundation for having everything in common and renouncing private property.
Exactly.
Going for the nationalization of the factories and manufacturers and the land of the country. And at that time, the priests and the pastors began to disseminate the communist propaganda.
So they were part of the propaganda machine.
Yes.
And again, I remember as a little boy, the communists were very good at propaganda. They would take people out on the 23rd of August or whenever there was a state visit, and everybody would applaud, and there were all kinds of signs and pictures.
Yes, very impressive parades.
Yes, and the pastors and the priests were part of this in the early 50s?
A part of them.
A part of them, correct.
Yes. Those who didn't buy into this kind of deception, they were targeted.
Right.
They were targeted initially by trying to discredit them, spreading all kinds of rumors about their moral flaw and some kind of things that may be something behind it, just to cast doubts.
Yeah, to compromise them somehow. Yeah.
Then the next step was to constantly threaten them. To threaten them with either persecution or with some form of taken to the labor camp, or and again under the threat, another group of priests and pastors abandon the integrity of Christian ministry. So the number of those who remain strong was smaller and smaller. Now,
go ahead.
They were targeted, and they were arrested, and they were put in jail or labor camps, and they were under enormous persecution. We had thousands and thousands. We had people that never came out from those communist prisons. We had people that were so wounded that when they came out and when they explained to the Western world the depth of communist terror. Even the United States Senate was shocked when they saw the wounds on the body of Richard Wurmbrand.
That's the person I wanted to ask you about. So you knew him personally, Richard Wurmbrand, and then there was Traian Dors, which was a Romanian poet. Again, these were faithful men of God who were persecuted for their faith during communism. Talk to us a little about that.
Well, if we speak about Richard Wurmbrand,
Right.
he was a native Jew.
Mm-hmm.
In his early age, he embraced the communist Marxist ideology. He was even taken to Moscow
Oh, wow.
to be indoctrinated and become a communist leader. In the process, something happened. And Richard Wurmbrand met Christ, and his life was changed.
Right.
He joined the Lutheran Church
He
of
was a
Romania,
Lutheran priest, yes.
and he became a Lutheran priest.
Yeah.
And when the communists came, he already knew the communist lifestyle, ideology, and lack of integrity from within. So he openly confronted the communists. He was arrested, he was placed in jail, and according to his way of recording and telling his life in prison, said, I was twice persecuted. First of all, when they come and say, all those who are Jew, a step forward. As a faithful Jew, I stepped forward, and I was beaten up as a Jew. Then said back into the line, all those who are Christians step forward, and I stepped forward as a Christian.
Wow.
And I was beaten as a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
So with his style, he said, I endured twice as much persecution because I was a Jew and I was a Christian.
Right. Yeah. So he captured a lot of these stories in his book, Torture for Christ, which is certainly a book that we recommend. So talk about your story in this context. So you were born in the 1950s in a village of Burzuk, the great metropolis, and then you grew up in this environment. On one side, in the village church, there was a revival. There were people who were faithful to God based upon their experience in the war. On the other side, within the national politics or the national denominational level, there were some people who were betraying the faith, and then some people who were being faithful. Tell us your story. You ended up going to the university in Bucharest, which was pretty remarkable for a village boy from the other side of the country. Tell us how that went about.
The first memory I have is about my oldest brother who came back from school. And in school, he was asked to come home and persuade our father to renounce the land and willingly to go and offer his land for the agricultural cooperative. He came home and he told my dad what the school is asking, under the threat that if our father is not giving the land, he would be expelled from school.
Wow.
So I do remember my dad and my mom looking at their son, the firstborn, under this pressure to persuade his parents to renounce their property. They were not willing to do that. So my oldest brother went back to school, and he was under more pressure. He came home, and caught between the school pressure and the family standing. It was a very critical time. So my parents, with tears in their eyes, they were telling their firstborn child, this is not right. This is something evil.
Right.
We should not give in to this evil. Well, things move on.
But this was a common practice under communism.
Oh, yes.
Because we saw it in the Soviet Union, we saw it in Maoist China, where brother was turned against brother, husband against wife, son against parents, where they were really made to choose. Are you more loyal to the state or are you more loyal to the family? And the idea was you ought to be more loyal to the state, wasn't it?
Yes, and after the initial stage, when a small number of people gave into that to willingly go and renounce their property, they came with the heavy heels.
Right.
And literally they crushed the village.
Yeah.
They went from house to house, and they put the people under the given fact that they took everything from them.
Yeah.
And there were fraud signatures that people would sign to give up their properties. Some people under that pressure lost their mental
For sure.
balance. They had nervous breakdown. Some people went as far as to commit suicide. It was the kind of terror because there was another element into that. Those that were more vigorous in their resistance, they were exposed to another form of terror. Namely, at night, the communist police came with those black vans, Duba.
Right.
And they came late at night with the head-on lights on the house. And communist police with masks will jump out of that car, burst into the house, grab the husband of the house in his night clothes,
Yeah.
throw that person into the black van, and they will disappear. And nobody would ever hear what happened to that person. So there was the night terror for those who oppose entering into this agricultural cooperative. So with that, the villages of Romania, the communities of Romania were exposed to the night terror. When the people heard the noise of a car engine at night, they were having the nightmare of their life.
Yes. Terrible times.
So let's go back to the pastor and pastors.
Yeah.
Those that were in the communist prisons, in the laborers' camp, some of them never compromised. Others were broken there. Those who never compromised, most of them died in the communist jail. Some of them survived. Those that survived are our heroes. Now, I was born and raised in that time when some people compromised, some people stood strong. Those that compromised were allowed to continue their life as pastors. And I do remember when those compromised pastors will come to our churches and tell the scripture from Romans chapter 13.
Their favorite passage.
The favorite passage.
Yes.
That the rulers are the servants of God.
Right.
And we are obliged to obey the rulers.
Right.
The government leaders. And they went even one step further. They said that Jesus had two offices, the office of a lamb and the office of a lion. And we should not be mistaken, because now we live in the time when Jesus is just the lamb for slaughter. He is not the lion that we should align with him and strongly resist the communists. So they said that the lion will come at the second coming. Until then, we are the lambs for slaughter. And so we should not raise our voice, because like a lamb without a voice that goes to the slaughterhouse,
Yeah.
this is our way of life.
And that was the teaching coming from so-called church leaders, that to be a Christian meant to be uninvolved, to be obedient, to not worry about what's going on around you, to just faithfully listen to whatever is being said and not even think about it, wasn't it?
Now, with that in churches, at school, we were exposed to communist indoctrination.
Right.
The theory of evolution, atheism, Marxist ideology,
Right.
Marxist economy,
Right.
Marxist form of government. There was the media propaganda. With that, we had to face the challenge as school kids. Now, what do you do? What do you believe? What is your future? What is the end of all of this? So a dark night came over Romania, over the kids of Romania, over the families, over the churches. Then we heard stories about these great heroes that are in jail. And there was a sort of little light in the night.
Right.
The testimony of Traian Dors, of Richard Wurmbrand, Nicolae Moldoveanu, Ferenc Vișchi, and Constantin Tudosa, and many, many others that stood strong.
Yeah.
So the light that came from the testimony of these great martyrs did something to my life.
Talk about that. Talk how you changed, because you should have been a Marxist communist. What changed in your life? How did that happen?
My father had a very wise approach, hosting those Christian unofficial missionaries that came to our village. They spent time and they stay overnight in our house. And my father allowed them to tell stories and testimonies about those Christian martyrs that are in jail, their experiences with God and their integrity. That sparked something deep in my heart, with a desire to know these people and to learn from them. Then something else that my father did that was a great, great blessing to me. After the communists took the land from farmers, farmers were obliged to work now on the new agricultural cooperative, but what they get was not enough for them to survive.
Right.
So a number of peasants now were stealing at night from the field wheat, corn, whatever they could, so that they can feed their own families. So there was this kind of night corruption, night fraud. My father didn't accept that. So he came to the city to look for a job. And being a peasant with very little education, he got a very poorly paid job, worker at the tram rails. And he was paid 250 lei, Romanian currency.
This at a time when salaries were about 1,500, maybe close to 2,000.
Those in the better
And
echelon,
the better echelon,
they
yes.
will have much more. But he was at the lowest level.
Right.
Every weekend he will come back to the village, and he had 2 big bags with bread tied upon his shoulder, one up front, the other on the back. He brought bread, and was poor quality bread. It was that dark bread.
Right.
It was not the best quality, but that was all he could afford.
Right.
Brought us so he would feed his family. Then something else happened. Others people that remained in the village, Christians, were recruited by the communists to be workers for the agricultural cooperatives in the leadership, in the administration.
Right.
And they became very corrupted, and they started to drink heavily, and they will come to church on Sunday drunk.
Wow.
But The pastors were under the control of the communists, the leadership of the church under the control of the communists, these people under the control, so nobody could discipline them. So that affected deeply the testimony of the churches in the community. And one would think that with that, the communists have made it. They targeted the leaders, they compromise, they put in jail, they eliminated, they destroyed the testimony of the existing one, and they targeted the mind of the young people. However, something happened in 1973. A man unknown to that, up to that point as something different, came to take the pastorate of the church in Oradea, because by that time our dad moved us from the village to Oradea.
You were a teenager at this time, about 15 years, 14, 15?
When we moved to Oradea, I was 15, but now I was in the late 19, early 20s. This man, Liviu Olah, turned out to be a spiritual giant. Spent hours and hours, according to the family that he lived with, up to 8 hours of prayer every day.
Wow.
When he came to the Sunday meeting, we were trembling under his ministry, and the revival started. He was a man of great integrity and great courage. He went head-on to confront the communists. There was heavy persecution on him, but he never wobbled, he never bent. Now that inspired a number of young high school kids and university kids. I had the blessing of being under the ministry of this great man of God, and his example, his teaching, literally got fire in my heart.
Right. So tell us, first of all, about what happened in the church, and if you can tell us also the numbers. So the church before he came in 1973
was a very small church.
Was a small church, a few hundred
very
members.
Small church, few hundred members, very discouraged, under the leadership of a former pastor that was compromising with the communists. The leadership of the church was under control. The moral standards were very, very low.
That was the other thing, if you can talk about the fact that even though people were Christians, they were compromised through drinking, through stealing, divorces, doing all kinds of things, which would discredit them in front of the general public. So the general public would look at the Christians and say, well, you're no different than the rest of us. We're all discredited. We're all kind of oppressed by the communists. There's nothing we can do. And Brother Liviu Olah was different, different personally in his preaching, and God blessed that, didn't he, in terms of the revival that broke out. The church grew by how many?
What he did, he encouraged us to join in prayer. And he encouraged us to attempt and dare great things with God. He encouraged us in 73, 74, 75, to pray and ask God to bring the day when the gospel will be openly proclaimed in Romania, in churches, public square, public schools,
right,
on radio and television, sports arenas. He said, our God is the God of the whole universe. We ask that He will demonstrate His deity, His sovereignty, and open the door for the gospel. He encouraged us to pray for Christian schools. He encouraged us to pray for the salvation of those in our families, in our churches, in our schools, in our neighborhood, our colleagues in the working place. So that fire was so intense that hundreds and hundreds of people were saved.
Right.
Now that revival spilled over the boundaries of Oradea city into the neighboring communities and throughout the country and even over the borders.
Right.
I do remember that at that time, a Hungarian pastor came to Oradea and he prayed, said, Lord, if you allow cats and dogs to cross the border between Romania and Hungary, Lord, don't stop the revival at the border.
Wow.
I will never forget, he said, Lord, cats and dogs.
Right. Yeah, they can go back and forth.
Yes, but let the revival come in.
That is incredible. Let's continue the story with your conversion. So this was the mid-1970s. You were studying to be a student in psychology. So you did not go into theology right off the bat. Tell us a little about that and also how you got saved.
I was struggling as a teenager regarding my future. Mm-hmm. And you have to look at that kind of mixture, the teenage dream, to have a job of adventure. So I was considering to go into the Navy, aviation, military, some kind of profession that I thought as a teenager, with a teenager mind, that are full of adventure and with a good living, but also with a good status. However, in 1971, as I was getting ready to start my final year in high school, the last day of summer vacation, I met with a girl that I knew, and we were part of a small group of teenagers in the tiny church in the city of Oradea. She spent the summer vacation in Cluj with some friends. And when we met in the tram station just to exchange few words, I asked how she spent the summer vacation and said that she had a very interesting experience in Cluj. The family that she spent some weeks with them, there came a psychologist that is some kind of acquaintance of the family. And she told me about that psychologist. Now, that moment was something like a lightning in my heart and an inner voice that said, that's your way in life.
Wow.
So without telling her anything, next day I went to school and the professor asked, what are our dreams? And everybody was telling medicine, engineering, economic studies, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. So when it came to me, I said, I want to study psychology. And the professor looked at me and said, come on.
Again, the field was fairly unknown in Romania.
Unknown.
And in Oradea, which is on the border far away from Bucharest, was unheard of.
But the main point was that everybody knew that I am from a poor family.
Right.
That I am poorly dressed. I was not wearing those shining clothes. Coming from a poor family, you show that in your appearance.
Right.
So I said, come on. That's not for you. Mm-hmm. So with that, it was over the discussion, but deep in my heart, there was growing that conviction that that's my way. So when I finished the final year in high school, I decided to go to Bucharest because it was the only place in the country that they had clinical psychology. So I told my dad that I want to go to Bucharest and get the entry examination at clinical psychology. My dad looked at me and said, Paul, you know that we are a needy family. All our savings are about 1,000 lei. Probably that would have been $100 or something. Like
his salary for about 4 months, 4 months.
Yes. So I said, that's all the saving we have. If I give you the money to go to Bucharest, we'll be without food for several months. If I don't give you the money, you'll say that your dad didn't support you when you try to build up your future.
Right.
So I give you the money, but I plead with you. don't go. Stay home and look for a job here in Oradea so we can have a living. I took the money. I packed my suitcase with a few things that I could pack, and I went to the railway, bought the ticket, hop on the train. It was the slow train that goes to
and the distance is about 400 miles, about 600 and some kilometers.
It take 12 hours.
Yeah, now it's a long time. Then it was probably
12 hours.
Infernal. Yes.
12 hours was a night train.
Right.
So that girl that told me about her experience with the psychologist came to the railway station to say bye. And as the train was departing, she said to me, Paul, whenever you will come to the end of yourself, that is the place where the grace of God will start to work in your life. Bye-bye.
What a great encouragement. Now, you are not baptized at this point.
No, we went to church, but I was not yet decided to take the step to side with Christ openly. So I went to Bucharest. I was looking for accommodation, and I spotted a place in the attic of an old building where I was not supposed to pay for the lodging.
Right.
I identify a small, poor restaurant where I would have one meal a day. Now, I don't know if that well translates into English. Mămăligă cu smântână. It's a sort of polenta.
Polenta with cheese.
with
As a peasant's food, yes.
Very poor peasant food. But that was the cheapest menu that I could buy because I had only 1,000 lei. I had to pay the fees there to register.
Exams.
And I went to register for the entry examination. And that was the first shock because there were over 2,500 people that apply for the entry examination, and there were only 90 places.
Spots, yeah. So this is important. 2,500 people wanted to get in, and there were 90 slots allotted for that particular generation.
Now, the exam was very severe. There are two parts, a written exam from psychology and anatomy and physiology. So I went to the written part of the exam. We were given the topics. I did my best. But when the results came, I was very low on the list.
Yeah.
The mark I got was only 6. Now, in Romania, marks are from 1 to 10.
10, yes.
And ahead of me, from 7 to 10, were over 700 individuals. Now, that was the moment when the world was falling apart. It was a big chaos and a huge dark hole that opened under my feet. And I felt that I am swallowed up and there's no future. In that moment of discouragement, I could hear the words of my dad. You will take this money, waste them, and will be without food. So in that moment of discouragement, poorly fed, staying in the attic of an old building, the only thought that came to my mind was that this is the end, that I should end my life. So I packed my things in the suitcase and I wrote a note to my family.
Wow.
That I cannot come home and look into their eyes because I failed. And I had a plan what to do and finish with my life. As I was ready to leave that attic, there were the words ringing in my ears. When you come to the end of your life, there the grace of God will start to work in your life. That ring in my heart was so powerful that I stopped and I literally fell on the floor and began to cry out for God. Said, if you exist, if you care for me, here am I. Help me, or this is the end. As I was there lying on the floor, I could hear in my mind the orchestration and the choir of a song, and the chorus will say, not the strongest will win, but only those who trust in him.
And live through grace.
That music was so beautiful and so heavenly that my entire inner being was transformed. I don't know how long I was there on the floor, but when I stood up, there was a bright world in front of me. I said, I will press on. So I decided to go to the second part of the examination, which was the oral examination. Now, I know that this generation will not understand what oral examination was at the time. All students were assigned to a team of examiners, professors from the university, and there would be a huge wooden table in front of the professors. And there would be hundreds of small pieces of paper on that table. Each candidate will step in and will take two of those pieces of paper and look what were the topics, kind of lottery.
Yeah.
And then you will tell whatever you know
On those topics.
on those topics.
Yeah.
Well, they will give you about 5 minutes to jot down a sort of script there for you. So I went in. Those professors behind the wooden table were so unattractive and frightening. I would say that they were terrorists.
Right.
So I picked my two pieces of paper, look at them, and everything turned blank and dark because I had not a clue. I felt that the world is turning around. So all those thoughts that were now crowded my mind, and the feelings that everything that happened to me there on the floor was a sort of delusion.
Right.
That there's no way ahead. Why don't you throw the paper and leave? And another deep voice inside, take a seat and pray. So I took a seat and I prayed. And as I was praying, I heard a voice dictating me the topics that were on my paper. It was a voice that I could hear in my mind. Nobody else could hear that because there was the room with the examiners and others. So I took my pencil and I began to write as fast as I could to keep in step with the voice. I wrote the first topic, I wrote the second, and I heard my name. Negrut, is your turn. I went, and not having the critique of what is there, is it right, is it stupid, is it correct, I began to read what I wrote. And you know the student behavior. When you are not sure of what you are saying, you say it fast.
Very fast, yes.
So I read my paper as fast as I could. I finished the first subject, and the chairman of the examining board said, where are you from? I told him, what is your father doing? I told him, and I could see that every response I did was not
diminished your position.
was not impressing him.
Yes.
So he said, what kind of books did you read for this exam? Who trained you?
Right.
Coach you? So I told him the truth. He said, do you know anything about the second subject? I read my second subject. Then he asked me, what is your mark at the written test? And I said 6. I could see a sort of concern of his face. Then he scribbled something on his paper there. Then he stood up. He stretched his hand across the table. He shook my hand and said, I am so glad that you are my student.
Wow.
And he gave me the mark 10, A. Well, with that, when the final results came, I was on the position 36
Out of 90.
out of 90.
Right.
So this is how I enter the university, and that girl that came to the railway station is my wife now. And he asked me to continue to tell the story if I do that. But remember that is Jesus' stand, not mine. So I should not take credit for that. I leave it to God.
Yes.
But this is how I got into the University of Bucharest Clinical Psychology in the summer of 1972.
And I think this is an important point to make before we go on, because part of the communism strategy to persecute the Christians was by not allowing them to go to higher education.
Yes.
So you were an outlier in the evangelical community.
A very careful screening.
Right.
But because I was not a baptized believer, they do not have on the records that I am in the... Why? Because in those days, the list with those who were baptized and approved for baptism, they were approved by the Department of Religious Affairs.
Wow.
A communist agency that will ask for the list. And that list will go to secret police and they'll go into the files of the Communist Party. So not being baptized, I was not on the file.
Wow.
Because otherwise I will not have been accepted. So now I was saved, I was a student, and that was the beginning of another chapter of my life. But that's another story.
And we'll talk about that next time. Thank you so much, Dr. Negrut. Thank you so much for following us. We look forward to having you with us in the next series of this podcast.